on my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to stop the theater, to stop throwing red meat to the hard right base, and join us in really solving the problems of America. I yield the floor. And I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Nebraska.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that I be permitted to enter into a colloquy with my Republican colleagues for up to 30 minutes. Senator Alexander of Tennessee, Senator Hoeven of North Dakota, and Senator Risch of Idaho will participate with me in this colloquy.
Without objection.
Today to speak to an issue that I believe has all the potential in the world to define the future of this great country. And it's an issue that all of us who are participating in this colloquy are very familiar with, and that is the balanced budget. All of us are former governors of the states where we come from. Now, in my state, the state of Nebraska, our Nebraska Constitution requires a balanced budget. Not unusual. I believe 49 out of 50 states have this requirement in their Constitution. It's not theater. It's the way we do business at the state level. In addition to that provision, however, our state Constitution also says that the total amount of money that the state of Nebraska can borrow is $100,000. $100,000. So what does that mean? We must balance the budget on an annual basis, and we can't go out to the debt market and burden our children and grandchildren by fulfilling promises that, quite honestly, we have no idea how we pay for it. We can't do that. Does that sound familiar? That's what the federal government does every single year, and the federal government has been doing it for decades and decades. You see, in Nebraska, Madam President, we are forced to prioritize and live within our means. We have a very simple, straightforward philosophy. We don't promise something that we can't pay for, and we don't buy something that we can't pay for. Now, is that unusual? Is that radical? Well, every working family in America understands that, and they live by that simple concept. The simple concept that you shouldn't be buying things that you can't pay for. If you do, it gets you in trouble. Sadly, the federal government just doesn't think that applies, thinks it's kind of a radical notion to apply that to what happens here in Washington. Well, let's look at the results of this kind of policy in my state of Nebraska. The unemployment rate in Nebraska today is 4.1%. 4.1%. During one of the most difficult times since the Great Depression, the unemployment rate in Nebraska never exceeded 5%. As I've said before on this floor, let me state that a different way. That means that about 96% of Nebraskans have work. You see, our state believes in the philosophy of less government. I've said many times, government doesn't create the jobs, the private sector creates the jobs. It's small businesses, and businesses willing to take the risk that will get us out of the tough times we are in now. When I was governor, Nebraska went through some very difficult times. I was governor on 9/11. I was governor when the dot-com bubble burst. Well, I didn't have the option of walking into my State of the State address and standing there and saying, well, geez, folks, this is tough times. We're kind of divided out here. We won't be passing a budget. Had I said that, I would have been looking for another state to live in. I would have been laughed out of the governor's office. Well, there were no easy decisions. but there were necessary and important decisions to be made. Nebraska pragmatism would go a long way here in Washington, but you know what? My state is not unique. My state is not unique in terms of this balanced budget requirement. In fact, I have other governors with me today, and I'd like to start out by recognizing Senator Lamar Alexander of the state of Tennessee. Now, Senator Alexander, when you became governor, I know that you had a lot of priorities, but you created an environment in which job creators could thrive. You created that environment with the spending requirements of your Constitution. I would like you to tell us how you did it, how you took your state forward, even though you had to balance your budget.
Well, thanks, Governor Johans. It's terrific to be on the Senate floor with other former governors. When we were debating the health care bill last year, I said that everyone who votes for it ought to be sentenced to go serve as governor for 8 years and actually try to implement it. But let me try to answer your question briefly so we can hear from the other governors. I became governor, Governor Johans, 30 years ago in the early 80s, and interest rates were inflation was 20%. Hard to imagine. And in the early days of the Reagan administration, they had driven up interest rates to 12% to try to bring inflation down. So we had terrible times. And, of course, we still had to balance our budget. We had to live within our means. We had to have the amount of money coming in equal the amount coming out. And let me just tell one story of the difference that's made in our state and how it could make in the federal government. The other day in the Environmental and Public Works Committee, the Tennessee Chief Highway Engineer was testifying. And he was there when I was governor. He's still there. And one of the senators, the chairman, suggested that perhaps some flexible federal financing would be a good thing for Tennessee. In other words, loaning some money to the state of Tennessee to build roads. And the state engineer said, Madam Chairman, he said, with all respect, we don't want to borrow any federal money. The state of Tennessee has zero road debt. Well, that about brought the hearing to a halt because several of the senators hadn't ever heard of such a thing. He said, yes, that's correct. We have zero road debt. We use all of our gas tax money to build roads, none of it to pay interest. That means, I would say to the senator from Nebraska, when we have a tough time, like we did when I became governor, when you were governor, as we do in the country today, if our interest rates are low or we pay no interest, we can use that money to get through tough times. A lot of the businesses and the families today that have less debt are making their way through these tough times more easily. On the other hand, the federal government, according to the President's budget, by the year 2020 would be spending more money on interest on the federal debt than it would be on our national defense. The interest on the federal debt would be $931 billion by 2021. What if that money could be put back in our pockets through tax cuts or used to help send kids to college or build roads in the state or energy research to lower the cost of gasoline? So one way I would say to the Senator of Nebraska that balancing the budget helps create jobs is if you keep your interest payments down, you keep your taxes down, and you can spend your money wisely on things that count.
Senator Alexander, you raise such a valid point. In the state of Nebraska, we don't have any road debt either. You know, if we wanted to pave a mile of highway, we had to have the money in the bank or it did not get done. And you know, the other advantage of that is when the economy started to lift, you didn't have to pay back all that money that you had borrowed. You were ready to take off. And so I would just have to imagine in Tennessee, like Nebraska, our economic recovery was just much easier to achieve. Now, I had the pleasure of serving as governor of Nebraska when Senator Hoeven was governor of North Dakota. The state of North Dakota is often recognized as one of the best managed states in the country. It's got its fiscal house in order. runs a surplus with some of the lowest unemployment rates of any state in the country, and yet you suffered through some of the same problems we had after the dot-com collapse. Senator Hoeven, could you talk to us a little bit about how the balanced budget provisions in your Constitution required you and the legislators to manage the state?
Thank you, Senator Johans. It's an honor to be here with you and also with a good senator from Tennessee, Lamar Alexander. Great to be here with you, as well as Senator Risch from Idaho. We have a common shared experience as governors, and it's wonderful to draw on that. I also have to mention that the presiding officer in the Senate today, Senator Shaheen, is a former governor as well, and we have that common shared experience actually here today on both sides of the aisle. And it's an honor and it's a pleasure to be here with you and talk about this matter that is so very important, particularly as we face the need to do something on the debt ceiling. This issue of dealing with a balanced budget is of paramount importance for our entire country. And your lead-in is exactly right. We serve together as governors. Matter of fact, truth is, I would call you because you were elected governor before I was for advice and ask you about some of the things that you were working on in Nebraska. And our states share many things in common. One, you mentioned a low unemployment rate. The unemployment rate in our state is 3.3%. And again, I attribute that to building a good pro-business, pro-growth, pro-jobs environment that stimulates private investment, and stimulates job creation. As you mentioned so very accurately, jobs are created by the private sector, not by government. And so you've got to create that environment that stimulates and encourages and helps, create a forum for that private investment. That's how we create jobs and get this economy growing. On the one side, we've got to have a growing economy, which we don't have at the national level right now. And on the other side is we've got to live within our means. We've got to control our spending. And the federal government has a responsibility to control its spending just like the states do, just like businesses do, like families. Look, we have got to not only balance this budget, we have got to live within our means on an ongoing basis. 49 of the 50 states have either a constitutional or a statutory requirement that they balance their budget every year. Every single governor here with us today had to balance their budget every single year. It was recently reported that 46 states are already on track to make sure that their budget is balanced by the end of their fiscal year. Federal government needs to do the same thing. Look at our situation right now. Look at our situation right now. Federal government takes in $2.2 trillion in revenues. We take in $2.2 trillion in revenues, but we spend $3.7 trillion. That's a $1.5+ trillion deficit every year. And that's rolling up to a debt that is now closing in on $14.5 trillion. We've got to address this. Is not something we can hand off to future generations. And so our message to the administration is, you're making it worse. We have got to start living within our means. We can't keep spending and then borrowing and then raising taxes and expect to have an economy that grows and a government that lives within its means. And that's exactly why we're here today talking about the need for this balanced budget amendment. And if you think about it, the balanced budget amendment gets everyone involved, both now and for the future, because it has to be passed by both houses of Congress with a two-thirds majority. That has to be done on a bipartisan basis. And then it goes out to the states. And 3/4 of the states have to ratify it for it to become part of the Constitution. That gets everybody involved in doing exactly what we need to do. And that's getting on top of this deficit and this debt, both now and for future generations. Again, I want to thank the good senator from Nebraska for holding this colloquy and for inviting me to be part of it with my fellow governors. Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Well, let me thank Senator Hoeven. I noticed today that we are also joined by another former governor. In fact, this former governor is part of the class. We were both elected to the Senate at the same time, so we're both part of the same class. But Senator Risch, at one point in your time, in your career, you served as governor of the state of Idaho. You had financial restrictions just like we did in terms of a balanced budget. How were you able to deal with important priorities while balancing the budget and bringing your legislative process along in accomplishing that? Could you talk to us a little bit about that today?
Well, Senator Johans, thank you very much, and I'm honored to be here with the other former governors. There are a handful of us on each side who've had the honor and privilege of serving their states as the chief executive, and so it's a real honor to be here. And I bring that experience with me, and I think every one of us brings that experience with us. I not only bring that experience, but I did almost 3 decades in the Idaho State Senate balancing a budget, and indeed I was in the leadership having to do what the leadership does here as far as bringing the two ends together, because we have a balanced budget requirement in the state of Idaho, just as virtually every other state does. And does that create some angst when you're the chief executive or when you're in the legislative process trying to balance? Of course it does. I'm sure that the presiding officer wound up with the same thing in her great state as she tried to balance the budget, because no matter how much money you have, it is never enough. And as you've pointed out, Senator Johans, that it is a matter of priority. This is not rocket science. What the states do, and indeed what businesses do, and indeed what families do around the kitchen table, either formally or informally, they anticipate how much money is going to come in over the year, sometimes over the month, sometimes over the week. They anticipate how much money is going to come in. And then they say, well, we have priorities. What is our first priority? Well, of course, in a home, you've got to be able to eat. You've got to have the utilities paid and a roof over your head. So those become very important. To a government, obviously, if it's a state government, education is the largest expenditure for virtually every state. For the federal government, obviously, the highest priority is national defense. But you make a list. And then what you do is you allocate the money you have to that list. Now, when you're done, nobody ever stands up and say, boy, that went really well. We have enough money. We've got everything funded. We're able to do everything we want to do. No, absolutely not. Indeed, around here in this city, this government is spending $3.8 trillion, and I can tell you there isn't a day goes by where we don't get hit up with somebody saying, you know, it's not enough. Our agency does not have enough money. Why, we can't even blank, fill in whatever you want, whatever agency it is. Everybody tells you they don't have enough money. And yes, that's right, because a balanced budget requirement acknowledges a plain, simple fact of life, and that is there are not enough resources to do everything that you want to do. Indeed, a lot of times, there isn't even enough money to do what you need to do. But what you have to do is you have to do the best you can with what you have. Without a balanced budget amendment, it becomes just the opposite of that. You just keep spending. People say to me, well, Jim, you've been in public service all your adult life. Has anything in Washington, D.C. surprised you? And I said, yes, but only one thing. The stuff that goes on here doesn't surprise me at all, except the cavalier attitude that this city has, and indeed this institution has, for the value of money. It just astounds me that in this institution, they don't stop spending money when they hit the end of the budget, or they don't stop spending money when they hit the end of the resources. They stop spending money when they run out of time. That seems to be the only sideboard on how much money that is spent. Well, if you look around, and people will criticize us on this and say, oh, you foolish Republicans, what are you talking about? You balanced budget amendment. Why, that's really dumb. You know what I say to them? Look at the states. Look around at the states. Now, there are 2, maybe 3 states that are having very, very difficult financial situations. And it's because they either don't have a balanced budget amendment or they've done some skullduggery to get around the balanced budget requirement that they have. But every other state has their financial house in order. Has it been painful? Of course it's been painful. It's painful to everyone when they don't have enough money, including American families. But that's simply the way it is. Well, one of the problems we're having here is the basic foundation of the difference between Republicans and Democrats. People who say there's no difference between Republicans and Democrats ought to come here and spend a day here. They would find that philosophically we are hardwired very differently, like 2 brands of computers trying to talk to each other. We are hardwired differently. Republicans believe that this nation was founded with the idea that you would have a limited central government. It was founded by people who indeed feared a central government, who, by the way, their fear, as we see every day now, is very well founded. We believe in a limited government. We believe in individual responsibility. We believe in the responsibility of the states. It's hard to find people in this town that actually believe that the states are sovereign, that it was the states that created the federal government and kept a leash on it and said that you can only have the powers that we are specifically putting into this Constitution. Now, the courts over the years have expanded that dramatically, but nonetheless, the vision that the Founding Fathers had, that the American people had when they put together the country that created the most successful, the wealthiest, the culture that enjoyed the best quality of life that anyone on the face of this planet has ever enjoyed before, the Founding Fathers said, look, we're going to create a government for the individual, to give the individual the ability to prosper, to give the individual opportunity. That's what they said. They didn't sit around the table and say, you know what, we need a nanny state. We need to create a government that's going to take care of every American from the time they're born until the time they die, just like in Europe. In Europe, the government pays for your birth. In Europe, the government pays for your funeral. And indeed, it pays for a whole lot of everything in between there, including every dime you spend after you retire. That is not what America was founded to do. They did not sit around and say, how can we take care of the whole society? They said, how can we defend this country? How can we make sure that no enemies come into this country? How can we make sure that people have the opportunity to succeed? Yes, some will fail. Yes, some will succeed. Yes, we're going to have poor people, and yes, we're going to have rich people, because that's what a free society is all about. But everybody's going to have the same opportunity. Everybody that's born into this country or becomes a naturalized citizen in this country is going to have the opportunity to succeed in a greater fashion than anyone on the face of this planet has ever succeeded before, and they're going to do it without government interference. My goodness, how far we have come from those days, and not in a good way. They couldn't conceive that they needed a balanced budget amendment because the numbers we're talking about, they'd never heard of. The guy sitting around the table, if you'd have said, by the way, do you know the country's going to be over $1 trillion in debt someday? They said, well, what's $1 trillion? How many zeros is that anyway? They couldn't even conceive of that. So they didn't put that in the Constitution. But this isn't difficult to do. It's how much comes in and how much comes out, and they need to equalize each other. Now, I'll be the first to admit that our two parties don't understand each other. As I said, we're hardwired differently, and I have a lot of good friends on the other side of the aisle, and we have good conversations. They don't understand how I can possibly think that we could have a balanced budget. And I guess I don't understand how they think that we can spend ourselves into prosperity. We are indeed hardwired differently than each other. But I watched one of the leaders the other day come out here on the floor, and he was carrying on about how bad the balanced budget amendment was, and he said it would be an admission of the failure of this institution to be able to do its job. It would be abdicating our ability to do our job. Well, look around. We are $14.3 trillion in debt. You think the American people think we're doing our job when we're at $14.3 trillion in debt and now debating adding another $2.4 trillion to do that? If you come here and you spend a little bit of time here, you will understand that this institution cannot budget and do so responsibility. Given the opportunity, it will spend and spend and spend, and the only way this can be changed is if we have a balanced budget provision in the United States Constitution, just like virtually every state in America has. We're going upside down at the rate of $4 to $5 billion a day. We're borrowing new money, $4 to $5 billion a day. That's about 12 hours of the entire annual budget for the state of Idaho. This can't go on. The way to fix it is with a balanced budget requirement that, yes, puts a new rule in place. And you need rules, you need sideboards when it comes to spending money. I want to thank you, Senator, for providing us with this opportunity. Those of us who've actually lived in the real world where you couldn't print money, you couldn't borrow the kind of money that you're talking about here, where you had to make responsible decisions. And it's time that this government did that, and the only way it's going to do that, regardless of the flowery speeches that are given during campaigns of, oh, send me to Washington, I'll take care of this, I'll see that the balance is budget, I won't overspend. And they come here and they do it. The only way this can be done is to balance the budget. Now, we can't, to have a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, we can't do this. The American people have to do this. We can vote to ask the American people, do you think we should have a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution? Well, let's find out. Let's find out. There can't be anything wrong with giving the American people the ability to do it. It takes 3/4 of the states to ratify this. Let's give them the opportunity. Let's have the debate. Let's pass this and give it to the states and see if they do that. Thank you very much, Senator. I appreciate the opportunity to participate.
Let me wrap up this colloquy this morning by thanking my colleagues, each one of them, for their comments. Governors are practical people. We have to be. We have no choice. If jobs are going to be created in our states, we must lead that effort, not by jawboning and indicting the business community, but by creating the atmosphere that creates those jobs. If we are going to have a balanced budget, we must lead that effort at the state level. And every governor that has had an opportunity to speak this morning in this colloquy has made that point. At the end of the day, when our legislative sessions were over, we had to be able to tell the people of our great states that we passed a budget, that the budget was in fact balanced, and for some of us, that we did not borrow any money whatsoever to get that job done. We could learn something in Washington from that. This is not a radical idea. All of the rhetoric that we have heard about what a radical, crazy idea this is, well, how could it be so radical if 49 out of 50 states have decided that this is the right course and the right direction for their state government? I can't imagine that the American people want anything less of their federal government. And as Senator Risch has just pointed out, why would we not give the American people the opportunity to cast their vote on how best to manage their government? Their government. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I notice the absence of a quorum.
Call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
President, I would ask unanimous consent to dispense with the calling of the quorum.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I would also ask unanimous consent that Aaron Hernandez of my staff be granted the privilege of the floor for the remainder of this week.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today to talk about the regrettable and avoidable looming debt crisis, avoidable if we take appropriate and timely steps beginning today and continuing over the next few days. As we continue to work to get our economy out from under a protracted and painful recession and on a more robust path of growth and job creation, not having an agreement to pay our country's bills has severe consequences. Defaulting could mean not only a potential stoppage of Social Security and veterans benefits checks, but even more worrying than what happens to the bondholders and the middle class is the question of whether this could push us back into not only a severe recession, but a worldwide economic catastrophe. We look across at European governments that are struggling with sovereign debt crises, and I think one of the lessons that we should have learned from the events of 2008 and particularly that fall is that a lack of confidence and a vulnerability in one part of the global financial system can be magnified dramatically because of connections and interrelationships and producing a worldwide crisis. So this is an issue that we have to address. A failure to act would cripple our government almost immediately. In August, if there's not a solution, it is estimated that spending in the economy could contract immediately from anywhere to 40 to 50%. And that means that the U.S. economy would be hit with a loss of about $134 billion, about 10% of GDP for the month of August. And a 10% loss to August's GDP would bring our credit markets to a standstill and could lead to the loss of additional jobs. One of the ironies of this debate is that the proposal by some on the other side to simply not pass a credit limit legislation would be tolerable. In fact, it would be catastrophic. Catastrophic in terms of the very objective that they're urging, controlling the deficit. As people drop out of the labor force, they require more benefits. They are not able, legally, or in position to pay the taxes they're paying as they work. And in addition to that, it's been estimated that for every 1% increase in interest rates, and if we default, interest rates will go up on our treasuries, we will over 10 years accumulate $1.3 trillion in additional deficit. So in one fell swoop, the deficit hawks who are screaming so loudly today could put us on an even worse deficit trajectory. We know the job of bringing this budget into alignment is not going to be an easy one. It involves many trade-offs, some of which are likely to be very unpopular. Along with my colleagues who served here in the 1990s under President Clinton, we took some tough votes. There was not one Republican vote in support of us in 1993 and 1994 when we began the process of balancing the budget. It takes time. It takes difficult votes. It was done in the 90s, and as we all know, when President George W. Bush assumed office, we were looking not at massive deficits, we were looking at a potential surplus of trillions of dollars over a 10-year period. But with the programs that he, again, together with his Republican colleagues, embraced, of significant tax cuts, of an expansion of entitlements, Part D Medicare that was not paid for, that was put on the credit card literally, and 2 unfunded wars, we are sitting today with this huge deficit. Frankly, this proposal to raise the deficit limit is very simply paying for what President Bush and Republican Congresses did several years ago. And yet, we find my colleagues on this side saying, oh, we can't do that, or we can't do that without significant reductions in programs that are vital to Americans. We've already demonstrated. We did that in a continuing resolution that's covering this year funding, that we can and will make difficult cuts. We can reduce spending. But we have to do it in a measured way. And the other thing we have to do is recognize that any solution, just as it was in the 90s will require revenues as well as expenditures. That is the only way the arithmetic will work. I find it sometimes ironic when I go around and talk and say, oh, you know, if we don't solve this problem, you're putting all of this burden on our grandchildren. Where was that spirit when the President cut taxes and began to eliminate a surplus that would have benefited our grandchildren? Where was that spirit when the President decided to engage in 2 major wars but not pay for them? Where was that spirit when the President decided that he was going to expand entitlements and not pay for them? There were very few of my colleagues on this side worrying about grandchildren then. Well, we do have to worry about our grandchildren. That means we have to start taking the tough steps today. We have to start making the sacrifices that will get our budget in order. And those sacrifices not simply in cutting programs that are so vital, not only to so many Americans, but are so vital to our continued economic growth. I am sure everyone here will say they have important highway projects in their state. They are important infrastructure projects in their states. Do we sacrifice those projects? If we do, then we sacrifice our economic efficiency, we sacrifice our productivity, and guess what? We give the results to our grandchildren: a decrepit infrastructure, inability to be competitive in a very, very competitive global economy. So we have to, I think, move forward. We have to move forward to avoid a catastrophe to the economy if the debt ceiling is not raised, and also move forward to begin to balance our budget in the way it's been done in the past, and frankly, in the way that it only can be done. And that is that we have to start beginning today to make the sacrifices and make the tough choices that will, in fact, provide a better future for our grandchildren. We have done it in the past. We, in 1993 and 1994, we took tough steps, as I mentioned before, to begin to balance the budget. And in 1997, with a Republican Congress and a Democratic President, we took additional steps. We can do it, and we must do it. Now, the idea that we're going to default is, I think, difficult to imagine. But still, there are those out there on the other side that are saying they will not vote for raising the credit limit in any way, shape, or form. I think that's irresponsible. I think we have to be responsible. We have stood up before. We have taken tough votes. We have to do it again. And failing to do that just puts a huge burden on the middle class. The wealthiest amongst us may be able to negotiate through the vagaries of what might happen after a credit default by the United States. But for Social Security recipients, for military retirees, for those people who are looking for the basic services of government, transit to get to work, the ability to get on a plane, who is going to be manning the TSA post if the government cannot essentially pay its debts? All these issues have to be considered. Now, we have to, as I said, talk about revenues, too. It is astounding that people would literally be suggesting that we cut back Social Security benefits, we cut back retirement benefits, we do all these things. At the same time, we're providing about $4 billion in annual tax incentives to the oil industry. When the price of oil is at record levels, their profits are at record levels. These are a host of tax provisions that don't make us any more productive. In fact, one might argue they don't encourage employment here in the United States even. They, in fact, one could make the suggestion at least that the way we set up the system, it might indeed encourage employment overseas and then repatriate the profits here. Well, that might be fine for the big companies and the executives, but what about Americans who are looking for jobs? What about Americans who are looking just to get by? So we also have to recognize that some of the proposals we've made, in fact, all of them, as the President has talked about, with respect to revenues, would not be effective immediately. because we are still in a period of very anemic economic growth. They'd be effective in 2013, but they would go to that long-term goal of deficit reduction, which we can achieve. But it will take time, just as it took time in the 1990s. But even these proposals to close loopholes, which are, in my view, very difficult to defend, and to do so not immediately, but several years from now, even these proposals are being resisted by Republicans. That doesn't make sense to me, and I think also doesn't make sense to a growing number of Americans across this country. They want us to be responsible. They want us to be able to pay our debts, and then they want us to get our debts under control. And they recognize that that requires not just goodwill and good wishes, it requires real, difficult choices and sacrifice. We're seeing now an economy that is racking up huge profits for industry. I mean, the S&P 500's index of non-financial members are sitting on about $1.1 trillion in cash. The Federal Reserve indicated similarly that non-financial businesses have about $1.9 trillion in cash, defined as liquid assets. Record profits are being accumulated by corporations. All of this is good, but it's much better if those cash resources and profits are put back into the American economy in terms of creating jobs. And that should be part of our effort, too. Not simply reducing the deficit, reducing it in a way that we grow jobs here in the United States. And that is, I think, at the heart also of what the President is talking about in terms of his efforts. We are on the verge of tough votes and tough choices. And I hope we make those tough choices and tough votes. We do have to pay our debts, I believe, but then we have to get our debts under control. We've done it. We did it in the 90s, and I would argue without some of the policies that were enthusiastically embraced by many here today that are talking to sacrifice for the middle class, but no sacrifice for the very wealthy, we would not be in the same position we are today. So, Mr. President, I believe we're at a very, very critical moment. We have to resolve this issue by August 2nd. I hope we can do that. I hope it will turn on the same kind of sensible, balanced approach that we adopted previously in the 90s. So we have to go ahead and think in terms of restoring our financial house and then getting our American people back to work. And if we do that, I think we will fulfill not only the best hopes and wishes of the American people, but their strong desires. With that, Mr. President, I would request unanimous consent. Mr. President, I have 8 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders. I ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and that these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, with that, I note the absence of a quorum.
And the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Without objection.
Mr. President, are we in morning business at this point?
We are.
Thank you. Mr. President, we know as members of the Senate that we are facing a deadline of August 2nd for the extension of our debt ceiling. What is it? The debt ceiling is the authority Congress gives to the President to borrow money. Now you say to yourself, well, please stop borrowing. We're already deep in debt. But what the President is borrowing money to pay for are things that we've already spent, commitments we've already made. Let me give you an example. Voting to continue the war in Afghanistan costs $10 billion a month. We don't have that money. Not enough. We have to borrow 40 cents for every dollar we spend. So when members of Congress say, continue the war in Afghanistan, $10 billion a month, they are saying we're prepared to borrow $4 billion every single month to keep that promise. So the President comes to us about once a year and says, I need more authority to continue to borrow money to pay for the things that you've asked us to do. That's what it comes down to. Now, nobody likes to vote for the debt ceiling because it is so widely misunderstood. Most people basically say, I don't want to be associated with it. I've been guilty of that in my political career. But the fact is, most of us look over our shoulders at the final vote and say, we better pass this darn thing, because if we don't, we will default on our debt. The full faith and credit of the United States of America is like our credit score. Guess what? We have the best in the world. Of all governments in the world, we have the best. AAA. It doesn't get any better, and it's always been there. And that has helped us. It's helped us not only to borrow money at lower interest costs, but the fact that our economy is looked on as so reliable, attracts more businesses to our country. So if on August 2nd we default on our debt for the first time in our history, our credit score is going to suffer. The people who loan us money are going to say, we never dreamed the United States of America would fail to make a debt payment. And if they're going to fail to make a debt payment, then we're going to have to raise the interest rates because they're riskier than we thought they were. What happens when you raise the interest rates on the United States of America borrowing money? Every percentage point, every 1 percentage point adds $130 billion a year to our national debt. And over 10 years, 10 times that amount, $1.3 trillion every 10 years for every single percentage point. So is it important to extend the debt ceiling? You bet it is. Otherwise, our debt goes up. Our credit rating goes down. And there's another unfortunate. As the debt of America requires a higher interest payment because we have defaulted, interest rates go up all across America, in Montana, in Illinois, in every state. People who are borrowing money to run a farm, like our presiding officer, to buy a car or to buy a house will pay more in interest. Is that a good thing? Of course not, particularly in a weak and recovering economy with 9 million people out of work, maybe 14 if you add those who are only partially employed. 14 million people out of work and interest rates going up. Businesses don't expand as they should. People don't buy things, they put it off because interest rate costs are that much higher. That's what this is about. That's what the August 2nd deadline is about. But it's about something more. It's about the debt of this nation, which is a serious, serious issue. We are now in a position where, as I mentioned earlier, we borrow 40 cents for every dollar we spend. We borrow it from Americans who buy our treasuries and securities, and we borrow it from countries around the world who buy our debt. The leading creditor of the United States of America, China. The leading competitor of the United States of America, China. Put those two things together and realize our vulnerability as our debt grows larger and our indebtedness to countries like China grows larger. It's not a good thing. Plus, my son, daughter, my grandchildren, and yours will end up paying this debt. They'll pay in their lives for what we're spending today. Some of those things will benefit them, but some won't. Things we will consume, they will pay for. That's not fair. And if we are going to deal with this debt, there is only one rational way to do it. About a year and a half ago, Majority Leader Harry Reid appointed me to the Bowles-Simpson Deficit Commission. It was President Obama's commission. We met for 10 months. We came up with a conclusion, 18 members, 11 of us voted for it. And what we said is, if we are going to reduce this debt in a meaningful way over the next 10 years, we need to put everything on the table. Everything. That's painful. It means putting on the table things that I fought for as a member of the House and Senate and believe in and still do. But we got to take a look at them. Is there a way to save money? Is there a way to economize? Is there a way to spread the burden of responsibility and sacrifice so that it's fair in America? Now, there are some who say, no, we're not going to put everything on the table. Our talks have broken down recently with the Republican leadership over whether or not, under any circumstances, underline the word any circumstances, the wealthiest in America should pay more in taxes. They say no, not a penny. I don't think that's right. I think if we are going to deal with our debt and deficit in a meaningful way, that those who are well off and comfortable in this great nation should help us. They need to sacrifice if we're asking the same of working families and everyone across the board. So this notion of no revenue, no tax increase is, in my mind, short-sighted and won't lead us to where we need to be. Now, we also have to put entitlements on the program, and this is when folks on my side, the Democratic side of the aisle, start getting nervous. We saw the House Republican budget. We know what it does to Medicare, and frankly, I voted against that. I would vote against it any time it's brought before us, because what it does to Medicare is to dramatically change Medicare as we know it. For about 40 million Americans, Medicare is their only health insurance. These are folks over the age of 65 by and large, many of them with medical conditions who are uninsurable or certainly can't be insured at a premium rate they can afford to pay. Medicare is there for them and has been for over 50 years. And so the notion in the House Republican budget that we would double the out-of-pocket expenses for Medicare recipients and beneficiaries from $6,000, up to $6,000 a year is just something most people can't do. You know, if you are wealthy in your retirement, it's one thing, but most people are not. Many are just living paycheck to paycheck on Social Security and with meager savings. And the notion of spending $6,000 more a year out of pocket for Medicare is beyond them. I reject that House Republican budget approach. Are there ways to save money in Medicare? Yes. Let me give you an example. We created a Medicare prescription drug program, and we said, finally, we are going to help pay for the prescription drugs of seniors because you know what? If they get their medicine and they take it and they're well, they don't go to the hospital. And when they don't go to the hospital, their lives are better and our costs are lower. So it's better to give them the medicine they need and help them pay for it. Now, we created a plan with private health insurance companies writing the coverage for this prescription drug benefit under Medicare. What many of us thought we should do is to go a step beyond that. We should allow the Medicare system itself to offer a prescription drug benefit. We should model it after the Veterans Administration, where the VA buys prescription drugs in bulk at discount so that our veterans and their families get the benefit of those bulk purchases. We can do the same thing on Medicare. And then leave it up to individuals across America. Pick the plan you want. Do you want to go with the private health insurance when it comes to prescription drug benefits? That's your choice. Do you want to go with the Medicare benefit? That's your choice. That choice could save us $100 billion a year. That's a lot of money. We could end up with the savings there helping to reduce our deficit and not compromise the basic promise of Medicare prescription drugs. The same thing's true in Social Security. Now, this is when it gets very tricky, and a lot of people start heading for the exits. But here's the reality. Social Security, as currently written, with no changes whatsoever, will make every promised payment to every beneficiary for 25 years, with an annual cost of living increase. You can't say that about anything else in government. But what happens at the end of 25 years? Well, unless something intervenes, at that point, the Social Security benefits drop 22%. That's a big hit for folks that are living on Social Security. So what can we do today, 25 years in advance, what small thing can we do today to Social Security which will build up the solvency and life of Social Security for even more years. I think that's an honest challenge, and we should view it as an honest challenge, not to eliminate Social Security, but to say to the generation of younger workers in America, it's going to be there, and you'll be darn lucky that it is there. Because a lot of seniors today can tell you the story of their lives, paying into Social Security. They now receive the benefits. But what happened to their other plans for retirement? Well, that little 401k, that IRA, that SEP plan, took a hit a few years ago, lost about 30% of its values. And for many Americans with pension plans through the place that they work, some of the companies went out of business and walked away from those pension obligations. Social Security is still there. We want it to remain there. We want it to be there in the future. So we can find ways to strengthen Social Security and give it a longer life. We can find ways to strengthen Medicare and give it a longer life and still be committed to the basic mission of these entitlement programs. That has to be part of this conversation. Mr. President, I've spent the last few months following up on the Bowles-Simpson Deficit Commission, meeting with a number of my Senate colleagues, three of us on the Democratic side, 3 Republicans, and we have tried to take the Bowles-Simpson proposal and put it into language that works, make a law out of it so that it works. Well, we've been at it for a long time, and we've had our ups and downs. One of our members left, came back. It's a tough assignment. It isn't easy. And sometimes emotions run high because there are things of great value and importance that are being discussed. But, Mr. President, something happened this morning that was perhaps historic. We took our plan, which still is short of completion, and we said, invited every member of the United States Senate, Democrats and Republicans, to come and listen to a description of the plan. And if I'm not mistaken, Senator Warner's on the floor. He's on this group with me. 49 senators came to the room. And you know what? There were no fistfights. There was no swearing. Instead, Democrats and Republican senators sat in that room, 49 of them, listened to the outline of this group of 6 proposal, and came out with a positive feeling. Not all of them. I'm not suggesting they all signed up. I would never expect that to happen. But it is significant at this moment in our history that so many felt positive toward what we were doing. I hope we can take it to another level, another step. In the meantime, we have an important responsibility. We need to extend the debt ceiling on August 2nd. We cannot compromise the full faith and credit score of the United States of America. We cannot let interest rates go up and raise our debt. We cannot let interest rates go up and kill the recovery that's taking place in this economy by killing jobs. We need to do our part here. We need to solve this problem on a bipartisan basis. And I hope that we can fold into that as a critical element a plan to move forward in dealing with our debt. Senator Reid, the Democratic Majority Leader, and Senator McConnell, the Republican Majority Leader, are working together. America should take heart in that. The fact that they are trying to find a way through a very difficult political challenge. But the clock is running, and we've got to get it done. And today, you see a largely empty chamber as we prepare for a debate on a Republican alternative. It's an alternative which I will oppose and speak against and tell you why. It is not going to pass. We know it's not going to pass. But we have said to the Republicans, we'll give you your chance to make your case. That's all any of us can ask in the United States Senate. My plea to the Republican side of the aisle is, let's do this and do it in an efficient, time-efficient manner. Let's not waste time. Let's try to get to a good, healthy debate on this and to a vote, and then move to extend the debt ceiling on a bipartisan basis. If we don't, if the rating agencies, which downgraded us last week, come back and hit us again, it's going to hurt this economy, and it's going to hurt the families and businesses that count on us to make the right and important decisions on a timely basis. So I urge my colleague on the Republican side, wage a debate, wage a spirited debate in defense of what you believe in, and we will too on the other side, but let's not drag this out for days and days and weeks. We don't have that much time. We've got to get down to business. Mr. President.